Somebody asked me, do you want that stool up there? I said, it's not a case of want. It's a case I have to. How are y'all doing this morning? I'm doing quite well, thank you. It's good to see you. I think sometimes, yeah, Ed's having trouble hearing, but Ed has trouble hearing all the time. Looking out from up here is a privilege, not just because you get up here and people can listen to you and things like that, but to see from Marie all the way over to Jareen, just looking at all the different people. Wow. This is kind of what heaven's going to be like. Kind of. I have no idea what heaven's going to be like. I just know I want to be there. And I want to be there with you. But I have on my phone a, what do you call that, wallpaper. Jesus is wallpaper on my phone. I've got a picture there, and it's facing Jesus, but me in his arms. And I know he's saying, well done, good and faithful servant. I'm thinking, it will be worth it all. Last Sunday, there was a young gal that walked into our fellowship. She just Googled church near me. Now, I would not ask her to stand up or anything like that, but I thought, that's not an accident. And you should have seen the relationships that she was able to create or enjoy just almost like that immediately. And it made my heart swell, just about jumped out of my chest, just to see that. And to think how people who are searching after God can have a relationship with people. Oh, hi, Mark, how are you? You weren't there a minute ago. Oh, yeah. Yeah, how you doing? I'm good. Good. You know, I hear that Mark and Marie are not getting along all that well. Yeah, yeah. Marie asked Mark to sync her phone, and he threw it in the Gulf so he could watch it sink. Now you know. Explains a lot, doesn't it? There are some pretty phenomenal people in here. Would everyone hold your hand up, please? Just hold your hand up. That is an exact count of phenomenal people in here. And I'm privileged just to be up here. Privileged. One of the things I would encourage you to do is take notes. Last night, Judy asked me as we were leaving, she said, was anybody taking notes? And I said, my goodness, almost everybody was. And I think we're getting to the place where more and more of us are taking notes. And I think the reason for that is that we really do want to remember what happens on Sunday. You know, most of the time, if a preacher preaches an hour and a half, 3 hour long sermon, you know, and a 4 hour sermon, and people will go to lunch and they'll eat and they will have forgotten completely what the preacher talked about. If you write it down, that doesn't guarantee you're going to remember it. It makes it a little bit more likely, and then you can go back and look at it. All right. Now, how many of you have one of these things? Or as I have in my pocket. Yeah, one of those things too. Kind of the same thing. I got a new one of these. This was a little bit bigger than the one I had before. And last night, a really weird thing happened. I pushed a button a little bit too long. And I looked down at what was on the screen, and it was everything that we were talking about. Yeah, they're listening. They are. And I don't know if they're coming for us or not, but they're listening. Now, Matt asked me to preach, and I don't preach, I just sit here and talk. But he asked me to do this past Monday morning for this weekend, and I knew almost immediately what I was going to talk about. On Wednesday night, I don't know if you felt it, but there was a shift in the earth. Now, some of you are looking like, what? What's he talking about? I'll explain that in a minute. And that shift in the earth changed what I was going to talk about. Daily, it changed between Wednesday and now. And so I'm not real sure where this is going to go. All right? But we're all here together, right? And if I see you starting to leave or doze off, I'll know that it's going in the wrong direction. Now, the recent Saturday and Sunday messages have had a pretty consistent theme, right? Can anybody tell me in just a matter of 25 words or less, no, maybe 3 words or less, what that might be? Pardon? Growth. Growth. Maturing. One, there was a particular word that love. That's kind of a cool word, isn't it? And boy, we kick that word around in all kinds of different ways. And we will talk about that tonight, or today, or whenever it is, or however long it takes us to get through this. So, good. Jack says he's with me, so. You remember also, the kind of cute word that Matt was talking about was adulting. Yeah, which kind of means growing up. And so I want us to remember also when we started talking about, thank you. Jesus was talking to a bunch of teachers, pretty smart people. One of them asked him, what is the most important commandment? They had 613 to choose from at that point in time, but what was the first? Love God. And with all your what? What's that leave out? That includes your toenails. All your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is what? How? How many of you love you? How many of you love you? I mean, how many of you feed yourself? Yeah, that's kind of an act of love. I mean, and parents, and some of you, I've told you this, your children will grow up if you continue to feed them. Now, I've told that to Dukins and Gina. They did not listen to me. They continued to feed their children. In Mark 12, 30 and 31. You can say this with me. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind and strength. The second one is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There's no great commandment greater than these. So you don't have to look for a better commandment. You can just say, and rest on the fact that if we love God and we love each other, we're doing well. Now, I think if Matt's most recent message had a title, I think it would be Growing in Our Love. The subject of late has been growing, it's been adulting, it's been maturing, it's been about getting better at those things that matter. Getting better at those things that matter. There are so many things that we can concentrate on and work on, but I have to, being, Brandon said he was simple-minded. Brandon don't have any idea what being simple-minded is. I can concentrate on one thing. One thing. Hold up your finger like this. That's what being a Christian's all about. One thing. Loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I guess we ought to hold up two fingers. We do that, people are going to think we're hippies, so you know that. Wednesday, I mentioned Wednesday. Something happened with the men. Now, on Wednesday, we had the group of men on Wednesday can be kind of rowdy. Yeah. Matt Kuchar was there. So I don't need to say anything more. Dusty was there, yeah. Bill was there, yeah. Bill actually does not like facial hair. But he found that it kind of grew on him. Sorry, Bill. But seriously, something happened, and I don't know if everyone felt it, and I don't know if those who felt it the same. I felt it. I hope I'm not alone. And I do not want what we felt, to drop to the ground. So often, we'll talk about something. There's an old song that I remember singing in the past, and one of the lines was, I'm tired of being stirred and never changed. And I think there's a danger with things like what happened on Wednesday. We might be stirred, but not changed. And the only way that we can be changed is if we concentrate on it. There are 3 passages of Scripture in the Old Testament, and that's what we talked about. Some of you may still have the piece of paper that was on. But before we look at those, I want to introduce you to someone who was very well acquainted with those Scriptures, the Apostle Peter. In Matthew 4, Jesus sees Peter and his brother Andrew fishing, and he says, come, follow me, and I will teach you, I will send you out to fish for men. He even changed Simon's name to Peter. Peter, Petros, in Greek, means rock, a stone. And that's not to be confused with the bedrock of the fact that Jesus is the Christ. Then in Matthew 14, we see Peter. He's walking on water. Then he panics. Lord, save me. Because he looks around and he sees all of the stuff that's going on around him. In Matthew 16, Jesus tells all of his disciples that he's going to go and he's going to die. He's going to be killed. Peter rebukes Jesus and says, never, Lord. This is never going to happen. Not on my watch. Then in Matthew 17, he's with Jesus and Moses and Elijah. Can you imagine being on the mount of wherever that might be, that mountain, that Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus, Moses, and Elijah? They'd kind of get to you. Well, he got to Peter because he says, let's build a shelter for each one of you. And this is what God said. Now, this is an exact representation of what God said to Peter. Shut up. And listen to my son. His name is Jesus, and he's in charge now. In John 13, Peter refuses to wash Jesus' feet. He says, you shall never wash my feet. And then when Jesus corrects him, he overreacts. And he says, not only my feet, but my hands and my head as well. He wanted Jesus to give him a bath. And of course, Jesus said, you're missing the point. In Matthew 26, Peter boasts, even if I have to die, I will never disown you. Even if I have to die. Then just before the crucifixion, he denies Jesus 3 times. Look, now I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know the man. Then finally he began to call down curses and he swore to them, I don't know the man. Earlier that night, he strikes the servant of the high priest with a sword, cut off his ear. That was in John 18. Later, after the resurrection, after the crucifixion, the resurrection, Peter has been teaching for some time, and he's been having a great time getting to know. Now, Peter's a Jew. He's having a great time getting to know the non-Jewish brothers and sisters until some Jewish brothers and sisters came and criticized him for that. Criticized him for getting with non-Jewish people. Now, I grew up in a time where it was pretty easy if you lived in the South to be criticized for getting with a certain group of people. Well, it wasn't just the South, because I didn't grow up in the South. I grew up in the North. The same thing happened there. Now, I want you to remember this, that he'd been having a great time getting to know the non-Jewish brothers and sisters, and then he was criticized, and he withdrew from them. Now, that is a very brief introduction to the Apostle Peter. Great man, wasn't he? Sound familiar to any of you? Can any of you relate? I probably ought to ask you to hold your hand up. Peter is known as the apostle who only opened his mouth to change feet. He just kept putting his foot in his mouth. Couldn't get out of his own way. Now, those 3 scriptures that Peter was very, very familiar with, I want you to remember these scriptures in light of what you just heard about Peter's action in his life. Deuteronomy. Well, it's a lot easier to say it that way than Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 10, 17 through 19. I'm just going to kind of recap that for you. He defends the cause, but remember, it's Deuteronomy 10, 17, 19. For those of you who are taking notes, Deuteronomy 10, 17 through 19. Now, I think it's a good idea for you right after lunch, go back and read these. I do. And the reason is, if you don't, we have in our brains something that's called permeability. That's a very technical term, isn't it? And if you ask Dr. Deb, she'd probably tell you it's totally wrong. But we have this thing where things just are able to come into our brain. But with permeability is the opposite action as well. Things that come in easily, they go out easily. So the only way that we can stop that is to keep putting them in, all right? There was a story about a preacher who was trying out for a church. And he preached just a wing-ding of a sermon. They thought they were really impressed. And so they asked him back for the next Sunday. He preached the same sermon. And I thought that was odd. But they asked him out for a third. He preached the same exact thing. So some of the members of the board got with him and said, what's going on? He said, it's very simple. You start doing it, I'll stop preaching it. Ooh. And so there's some of that in this lesson, okay? Because Peter forgot a lot of stuff that Jesus has told him, okay? In Deuteronomy 10, 17 through 19, he defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you. And you are to love the foreigner because you yourselves were foreigners when you were in Egypt. Now, I don't know, maybe some of you have been to Egypt. I've never been to Egypt. But I know what he's talking about. Substitute the word bondage for Egypt. We were all in bondage. And so we were all foreigners. Every last one of us. We are all foreigners, or as my Aunt Mary Lynn would say, foreigners. Yeah. And so I looked up that word, foreigner. And it has multiple words with it. Alien is one of them. And I'm not talking about Alf. There's about 3 of you know who Alf was, right? So, alien, stranger, outsider. One of the questions that we had to deal with when we were talking about this on Wednesday was, have you ever felt like an outsider? Boy, I can remember feeling like an outsider in a number of different places. It is not fun to be an outsider. But we've all been outsiders. And that should temper the way we treat outsiders. Back to the definition. I looked up the definition of the Hebrew word, and it says a temporary inhabitant. This world is not my home. A temporary inhabitant, a newcomer without inherited rights. A newcomer without inherited rights. Think about what is happening in our nation right now. We got us a whole passel of folks in this country don't have inherited rights. And what does the Bible say we're supposed to do with people like that? I think you can draw your own conclusions. Hosea 6, 4 through 6. It says more than this, but I'm just going to distill it down to this. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Now, you know, in the Old Testament times, sacrifices were real important. They were sacrificing a goat, a lamb, a sheep, a bird, or whatever it might be, seems like constantly. But here God says, okay, think about all that. But I desire mercy more than that. Whoa. Today, mercy, not money. Mercy, not time. Mercy, not even sound doctrine. Not that he wants those things to go away or anything like that. He's just saying, put them in order. Mercy comes first. Mercy comes first. In Leviticus 19, 33 through 34. Leviticus 19, 33 through 34. And again, I'll just encapsulate this in the foreigner among you must be treated as your native born. The foreigner among you must be treated as your native born. Peter, I'll let you draw your own conclusions out of that too. Peter most likely had heard these scriptures from the time he was old enough to hear. This past Wednesday night, the men heard, we read, and we discussed those passages. The women in the congregation did the same thing the previous Wednesday night. Honestly, they hit me anew like the proverbial ton of bricks. I thought about showing up this morning without socks on because they had knocked my socks off. I forgot to do that. If y'all just excuse me a minute, I can do that. Now, I don't want to be too dramatic, but I do want to be dramatic enough to have this sink in. Because sometimes that's what it takes. We just hearing something and thinking, oh, that's nice. There's a passage that talks in the Old Testament that talks about that people are oftentimes hearing nicely worded love songs, and then they walk away and they forgot all about what they heard. I don't want that to be this way. I want these three scriptures to be not emblazoned in our minds, part of our hearts. It did shake my world a bit. When you get to be my age, having your world shaken can be somewhat unpleasant. But there is an old saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I'd read these things before. I guess I wasn't ready. I don't think Peter was ready when he heard them. When he was criticized for associating with people who were different from him, foreigners, he crumbled. He withdrew. He was afraid. The man whom Jesus called to fish for men was willing to go through his net. Now, I'm speaking metaphorically here. He was willing to go through his net and throw back all of those that he had caught that were not culturally the same as he was. Now, do you understand what I'm saying? We are called to fish for men, and we don't throw nothing back. Whatever God puts into our net, that's who we deal with. I'm thinking, yes, that's exactly the way it should be. But here's where Peter ended up toward the end of his life. And honestly, this is where I want to end up toward the end of my life. And it's where I want you. Now, some of you, you got a whole lot more life left in you than I do. But I want you as well to end up this way now, not waiting until the end of your life. In 2 Peter, now I'm going to encourage you to read both 1st and 2 Peter. Peter, I mentioned before, was the guy who just always had his foot in his mouth. He could not get out of his way. Who else in this audience is like that? We all like that. I know for a fact that Mark is. And Jack is. And I know Lisa is. And oh my goodness, is Jerry ever like that? Holy cow. Just think about that. The first thing that we need to do, I believe, is to recognize, and not in a, oh, woe is me, don't be Eeyore. but recognize in the right, sober kind of way is, I'm a mess. And I have inclinations that are not godly. However, I don't have a Bible up here, I should. I do, it's just kind of electronic. That's the way we learn how to become unmesses, through reading the Word. Here's what Peter said in 2 Peter, beginning in chapter 1, verse 12. Think about all of the stuff that Peter went through. Now, he had been with Jesus for 3 years, but he also had been teaching and preaching for 30 plus years after that, okay? He said, so I'll remind you of these things. Remember, again, he'd been with Jesus for 3 years, but he had been teaching the churches in the Mideast, what we call the Mideast, for 30. And some people even believe that at the time that he wrote this, he was in prison. There's a legend, I guess, that says that Peter was crucified upside down by his insistence, because he didn't feel worthy to be crucified like Jesus was. I don't know if that's true or not, but that sure does break my heart. So I'll remind you of these things, even though I know you know them. Who's he talking to? He was talking to Christians. He was talking to disciples of Jesus. I'm going to remind you of these things, even though I know you know them. Why was he going to remind them of them? They forget. We have excellently honed forgetters. We do that real well. And so that's why God saw fit to have things written down for us. We got no excuse. I mean, every one of us, almost every one of us, has some kind of an electronic device in the hand. You can get a Bible for free and read it. I don't want to say at your leisure, but whenever you want. Let's start again. So I'll always remind you of these things, even though you know them and are firmly established in the truth that you now have. I think it's right to refresh your memory. Some of the translations, one of the translations says to stir you up. I think it's right to stir you up. I think it's right to refresh your memory as long as I live in the tent of this body. Now, I'm older, I would imagine, than all of you, or any of you. That doesn't mean that I'm the only one who has the responsibility to remind you of these things. Who has that responsibility? We all do. Ourselves. That's right. I will make, and then, I think it is right to refresh your memory as long as I live in the tent of this body. He was talking about this. My heart gets kind of carried away here. He was talking about the tent of this body. All right, you got to be watching where I hit. And he said, I think it's right to refresh your memory as long as I live. That's my job the rest of my life. That's your job the rest of your life. Now, he was saying, because I know that I will soon put it aside. Again, some people think that Peter might have been in jail at this time, and he knew what the end of that was, that he was going to be killed. As our Lord, I can't imagine what this conversation was like, because he says, I think it's right to refresh your memory as long as I live in the tent of this body, because I know that I will put it aside, as our Lord Jesus Christ has made clear to me. And I'm thinking, thanks a lot, Jesus. Wonder what he told him. I think there's a passage that says there's going to come in a time, Peter, where you're not going to be able to lead yourself. Somebody else is going to lead you around. And I don't know if he was talking about infirmity or if he's going just because he's got chains on his ankles. I don't know. But he's talking about the fact that Peter wasn't going to be in charge of his own life anymore. And so he says that he knows he's going to die. Now, Peter wrote this when he was about 64, 65 years old. He died when he was 68. So he didn't have much time left. I think he was urgent in saying this because he says in verse 15, and I'll make every effort to see that after my departure, we sometimes call that legacy, what we leave behind. What are you going to leave behind? Peter says he's going to remind folks of all of these things that he learned from Jesus until he dies, because he wants to leave something behind, and that is that you will be able to remember all these things. Peter knew it was pretty easy to forget. He wanted people to remember. Now, Peter had returned to those things that Jesus said when he spoke these words just before he ascended to heaven. And we've quoted this I don't know how many times. Teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. That's our job. Go, teach, baptize, and teach them everything I have commanded you. Peter remembered. Jesus had called him to fish for men. And he calls you and me to that very same task, no matter who they are. There's no throwing fish back out of the net. And it could be foreigners, as it talks about in that passage, but it could also be people that don't treat us the way we want them to, or family members who don't see things exactly like we do, which means family members. and or it could be, you fill in the blank. Who could it be? When we were in Gainesville for a funeral about 2 months ago, a preacher up there, new preacher at Gainesville Church, his first name's Cash. I thought that was somebody's last name, but his first name's Cash. He showed pictures of different groups of people. People who were obviously of Arabic descent. People who were of African descent. People who were gay, obviously. People who were in jail. People who were, and then he asked at the end of that, he said, "You find anybody up there that you find it difficult to love?" Is right. Who do you find it difficult to love? Think about that, because you know there are people that rub you the wrong way just because of who they are. And Jesus is saying, I'm sending you out to fish for men, not for a certain kind of men. Turning again to Peter, the guy that always had his foot in his mouth. He remembered who Jesus was. And he says in 1 Peter 1:21, to this you were called. To this you were called. If you're following me or wanting to follow me, this is what I'm calling you to. This is what you were called. And the reason that I can call you this, Peter is saying, the reason I can call you to this is because this is what Jesus suffered. Jesus died. God died for you. And so I can call you to this because he left you an example. that you, and I think Peter would say, and I, should follow in his steps. Have any of you ever seen a bracelet that says WWJD? Yeah. I saw one of those. I think it was in northern Michigan. Can you imagine folks are thinking about WWJD in northern Michigan? And I thought, well, what's that? I had not read the book In His Steps yet. I've read it 2 or 3 times since then. And if you haven't read the book In His Steps, you all need to. It's not that hard to read. But anyhow, that is what Jesus calls us to. But I think in light of what we're talking about today, Jesus would say, love your neighbor as yourself. And there's no conditions on that word neighbor. Amen. Thank you.